The young lady wants to know what's to come. What's to come? What's to come is what you should.
What insights do you or the guides have about the energetic landscape of the coming year? Are there any themes or shifts they foresee for humanity?
Is there an attunement that would be helpful for me at this time? Know myself. Well, really, it's listen to your heart, acknowledge what comes, and acknowledge what comes, your secret wish, your secret wish.
Or do you have a thought about what the guides would say about AI?
Hey, everybody. Our mission here at the Heart Coherence Collaborative is to get people in touch with the healing power of the heart.
And we really need your help. Right now, only 1% of viewers subscribe. We are aiming to take that number to 6%.
The reason why we want to do that is the more people that subscribe, the more people in the world can learn the magical practice of heart coherence.
So please, help us out. If you ever listened, if you love this message, please just take a moment to subscribe.
Thank you so much.
We love.
Welcome, everybody, to the Heart Coherence Collaborative. We have our dear friend Paul Selig joining us again. Thank you, Paul, for being back.
Thank you. I think you might be our most interviewed guest.
Yeah.
So we love you here at the Heart Coherence Collaborative.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
And our community loves you too. We hear so many of them tell us how they're, going to all your courses and your classes, and they just love you. So this means a lot to us and our community. And so we want to start out by just asking you, what is new? You have so much going on. What the heck's going on this year?
I started trying, I'll say, to write my own story at this time last year, and then I got derailed because the guides announced they had another book to write. So they took me off of that, and they completed their 13th book in September, which is called Divine Union. And now I'm trying to get back into my own work sort of very, very hesitantly, I think, because that's a whole other commitment. So that's what's new, they're continuing their work. They don't seem to be that inclined to stop. It seems that as long as I'm willing to sit in the chair, they might have something to say, and I continue to say yes to showing up. So that's what's new, not much more.
Nice.
I would love to hear how I always see at least one dog, maybe you have more than one, in the background.
Yeah.
How many dogs do you have?
I have two. The black and white one is Lily. If she shows up, she often makes an appearance. She's been my dog for a long time. And there's a little blonde dog who was my mother's dog that I inherited, and she's quite old and deaf and having a whole second childhood now. She makes an appearance too, and occasionally she'll howl. So hopefully that won't happen while we're talking.
So yeah, I wanted to know, you told me a little bit about how your dogs are, and I would love to hear you talk a little bit about pets, and maybe if the guides ever talk about pets and our relationship with them.
No, they haven't. I mean, they acknowledge them, but it's not been part of their teaching thus far. I suppose one day if they want to get into it, they will. But, they're pretty specific in what they go on about. And I've come to that understanding at a certain point. Just because I'm interested in it or we're interested in it doesn't mean that it's on their curriculum for what they want to bring through. So I know that they know the dogs, and when I work psychically, I'm not an animal communicator, but I can step into them and I can feel what they feel like in their personality and sometimes their physiology, which is interesting because Lily's back has been out lately. So I've been feeling that, in its uncomfortability as she's healing. I'm trapped because I'm so close to her that I just pick up her stuff. But no, the guides don't talk much about it.
We're going to start going to the questions from the community. So somebody said you just finished your 12th book this year, which I think is the final piece of your four trilogies. So obviously that might not be the case. Starting way back with I Am the Word. How does it feel to have completed all these books?
Well, they said A World Made New is what's being referenced, and that was published in September and was dictated last year. And indeed, the guide said that it was the final book of the series that began with I Am the Word. It was the fourth trilogy and the third book. And now they're on to new stuff. So I dictated the 13th book, but I don't remember the content that much. It came fast, as they all do, over the course of about 2 months of public sittings. Um, so how does it feel? I think on one level I was relieved, like, oh, thank God that's over. And another level I was worried because what am I going to do now if I'm not, sitting in this chair? I mean, one of the things that I'm really grateful for is that this has been an unfolding and ongoing teaching from the very beginning. So it's not static. And every time I show up for a live event online or in person, I really don't know what they're going to do. There's a context that they create, and a vocabulary that they work with, that they build upon. But it's continuing to push the envelope, I think, for us. And I think it's really just a deepening of the teaching that they began with, I am the Word, which in some ways I suspect might hold the template for everything else that they've done, but I don't know. So how does it feel? It felt good for a minute, and then it was really, and now I don't know where it's going to go. I know that there's one more channel book that I've agreed to do. I don't know if there'll be more after that, but it's kind of not up to me that much. I say yes, and then I have an easy job. I take dictation, really. I'm not having to write. Doing my own writing is much, much, much more challenging than channeling a book that doesn't need any editing, which is just a relief. It's like you plug in, you say the whole thing, somebody else types them up now. In the beginning, I used to type up the books myself, which took longer than the dictation. Yeah, and then there's nothing else to be done except, proofread.
Is there anything that has come up when writing or starting to write your memoir that with the new framework that you see things through because of everything that's been channeled through you, is there anything that you've seen in a completely different way that's been part of your story?
It's an interesting question. I think I had to go through some difficult stuff in looking at my life and my past. I mean, my spiritual journey was not rainbows and unicorns. It was a tough one, and still can be. And although it's some light years different than when it was when I began. So I had to look. I'll tell this story. I was a bit of a drunk, and I was a young one, and one with a wooden leg. But the night of my last drunk, which was 37 years ago, a guy at a bar that I used to hang in, old guy, grabbed my palm and said, "What are you doing? Well, it's all dark. What are you doing? You're throwing everything away, everything that you've worked for. It's terrible." He started crying at the bar. This old drunk is crying at the bar. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he knows I'm a lush and I'm getting an addiction to this. And I'm like, oh my God, I must be throwing it all away. And the next morning, I woke up having spent my last dollar, really. And I woke up and I asked myself what I could do for myself that day that was positive, and I heard a voice telling me how to get my act together, that I needed to do it and where to go. And I went, oh, I never heard a voice before. I mean, it wasn't a voice in the room, but it was a thought that blocked out all other thoughts. And I did it, and I haven't had a drink since. But sometimes I wondered as I was writing this, oh God, maybe he was right, because I was at that time, a year out of graduate school. I had a hot career unfolding as, a playwright. And suddenly I realized I was absolutely penniless. I couldn't write. Everything, my whole life literally fell apart then. That's when everything fell apart. And I went, maybe he was right. But I think in some ways it did fall apart in order to be put back together in a much different way. So I had to live through some of that and sort of reassess my relationship to some of the choices that I made. And when I look back on it, it feels quite inevitable in some ways, although I was very involved in making choices. But you know this, but I wasn't somebody who I mean, I was an atheist, I wasn't looking for, I didn't know you could have a spiritual life. And I didn't really believe in channeling. I'd read half of a Seth book when I was a grad student between swollen bottles of NyQuil. And I thought it was fascinating, but I didn't finish it. So, I really did go on this journey into a desire for a relationship with Source, whatever you want to call it, which, isn't what it was. When I look back at my life in my 30s, I was terribly devoted, and I was clearing all this energy, and I was studying energy healing, and this has become my work now, and some of the abilities that I seem to have developed over these years, the byproduct of those original choices and what happened when I wasn't, smoking 4 packs a day or drinking, a lot of scotch. These things, the byproducts have all been very good, but I take them for granted in a lot of ways. It's normal for me now. It's not this exotic thing. I don't think of any of this as exotic. It's just another way of being in the world and having access. So I'm having to look at a lot, and clearly, because I keep avoiding the writing of this book, there's a lot I don't really want to look at and have to investigate, because I don't think, when I started doing this thing, I thought people would say, people write these psychic memoirs and these new agey memoirs, and it's like my friends who, talk to dead people. I was in this supermarket, and the woman behind me in line, her dead aunt just kept saying, "Tell her this," and it's all these anecdotes, and I don't have those stories. I have this whole other messy story, and I realize, that's the one I have to tell, even if it doesn't please the reader who want, hopefully it'll be uplifting, but I can't and I won't sugarcoat, because I would be really uncomfortable doing that. So we'll see. But thank you for asking that question. I'm still discovering the answer.
We're really excited to check that memoir out when it comes. So yeah, we have a lot of questions basically surrounding everything going on in the world. So this person said, obviously there's a lot going on in the world right now, with people seeming to be either ecstatic or depressed. What advice do you or the guides have for creating more unity, or is this polarization okay?
I'd have to go into the guides. I'm on my first cup of coffee. It's really early here on Maui, so we'll see. I don't know how good I'd be. The guides said in the very first book, which was I Am the Word, that humanity is at a time of reckoning, and a reckoning is a facing of the self and all of one's creations. And in the Book of Truth, which came out shortly before, was dictated right before the first election, the Trump-Clinton election. They said everything that's been buried is going to come to the surface, and the reason for that, they say, is that stuff has to be looked at. We don't get to fix anything by pretending it's not there. It's not about spiritual bypassing. And I think that some of what we're having to see right now is how we treat each other, and how terribly we treat each other, and have, as a country, as a world. It's not just us. Because I don't think these things get addressed unless we're willing to see how we engage in a kind of polarization. So the guide's newest book, the one that's not out yet, is called Divine Union, and it's a teaching of union. It's about moving beyond that kind of rift, and they finished this 2 months ago. So that's my sense. I'll see if I can hear anything for anybody. The only thing you need to know is that you have decisions to make about what you want to align to, and what you believe to be so, and what you believe to be so is not always so. The contradictions of this time are enormous, and to realize yourself in the face of contradiction. In the face of contradiction is only challenging. Is not only challenging, it's what you are choosing to do. It's what you are choosing to do, to shift beyond the old idea of what should be, beyond the old idea of what should be, to claim something other. To claim something other is actually a high opportunity, This is all righteousness. If you do this in self-righteousness, or with bias or hatred, will be challenged. You will be challenged. The outcome will not be high, and the outcome will not be high. How you all interface, what you think reality is with what you think reality is, how you treat your neighbor, how you choose to treat your neighbor, the kindness that you extend or withhold. The kindness that you extend or withhold will be determining factors in the future of your country, period, in the same period.
Thank you. What a perfect time for that book. When did you say that will be released, Divine Union?
Next winter, I'm told.
Great. Awesome.
Nobody's read it yet except the proofreader and, the proofreader and one friend who read it, but it's in the publisher's hands, so he hasn't called me and said, "Get that thing away from me." It's, I don't know. I don't know what any others. So
That's exciting.
The next question is the guides mentioned kindness. So the next question is about how many people struggle with setting boundaries while wanting to be compassionate and kind and loving. How do we balance kindness with the need to protect our own energy?
again, I mean, I could do this. I mean, I have the same struggles. I'm better with it than I used to be. I got to learn the great privilege of saying no, and that's a healthy thing to do when it's necessary.
Mm.
Let me see if they want to say anything. If you're being compromised by the needs of another, by the needs of another, if what you are doing is artificial, if what you are doing is artificial and not based on an awareness of what is truly needed, you're denying yourself. You are denying yourself. If you listen to the true self, if you listen to the true self, or the aspect of you, or the aspect of you that knows you'll be led well, you will be led well. If you're operating what you think you should do, if you're operating in what you think you should do, in likelihood, you will be deceived. You will be deceived. The true self knows. The true self knows. The small self thinks. The small self thinks. Setting a boundary is easy. Setting a boundary is easy when you know where you stand, when you know where you stand, and what you can do, and what you can do, and what you should not, and what you should not. I'm going to say, is that the correct word? Should not, what choose not to, or what you choose not to. Would be better said, would be better said. Your choice to stay apart. Your choice to stay apart from another's pain may actually be very healthy for them, may actually be very healthy for them. Your choice to enlist support, may be high as well, but there are different times for it. But there are different times for different acts, Learn to discern between the two, and you will learn to discern between the two.
So over the last few years, we've heard the guides talk a lot about the great reckoning that is happening on our planet. This person wanted to know, where are we at in this process? Is it just beginning? Are we halfway through? Coming towards the end?
I don't know. I think they've never said the Great Reckoning, which makes it a title of something like Great Awakening. They haven't said that. This is just what we are up against because we're having to look at our own stuff.
Hmm.
And I think to give it a title like that calls it like an era, that has a beginning and an end. I think we're always accountable to our own choices. I think what we're having to do now at a larger level is see where we have invested in fear. The guides have said about these times that everything that's been created in fear is going to have to be recreated in a higher way. But I don't know that we do this until we get to see how we are party to this. When the guide said everything that's been buried gets uncovered, people like to think, oh, good, I get to blame people, and I get to say I can hate more, and I get to be more right. And that's not the purpose. The purpose is nothing can be transformed until it's seen. We have to see what it is. Okay.
Makes sense.
What does it mean that you can't be victim and a master at the same time?
That's a quote from the Book of Mastery. And it's funny, at the time that dictation came, I was dealing with a rough situation where I was feeling wonderfully victimized. But, I was a fat gay kid who got bullied, so I'm comfortable with that role. I know what it feels like to say, look, he hit me, and look, they call me a name. And it's not that those things didn't happen or that people don't do terrible things or hard or painful things to one another. Clearly, it happens with too much frequency. But I think it's about how we hold these things and who's in charge, finally. I don't know if they can expound on this now. Yes, please. They're saying yes, please. The idea of victimhood, but the idea of victimhood as an identity is what must be shifted. Is what must be shifted. It's not the reality of the act. It is not the reality of the act. If someone punches you in the nose, you have indeed been hurt. You have indeed been hurt. But are you a victim? But are you a victim? And is that the label you carry? And is that the label you carry? Because if you choose to carry that label, you will perpetuate and continue to call the evidence of it to you, and continue to call the evidence of it to you, period. And they're saying period.
We've gotten this question a lot for all the different interviews we do. So we're going to ask you, and if the answer is no, that's fine. But do you have any insights into what happens in between lives?
It's not my work. I mean, I know what they've said before, which is not a lot different than others say.
Hmm.
I've been with people, which is interesting psychically, because I always say I don't, when I work as a psychic, they call me a medium for the living, which means if you're estranged from your sister, I can probably hear her pretty well and maybe be able to broker some kind of healing. But if your sister's on the other side, I will probably get her as she was when she was here, unless she wants to come through, and once in a while they do. And sometimes I've actually been with people, because I go to them often unintentionally right before they cross.
Hmm.
And it's been a remarkable experience in most cases to sort of experience what it's like to step across a I don't know what you call it, a veil for lack of a better word, but step into this other energy, which is really was remarkable, and it's moved me to tears a few times because there's so much love and beauty there. I've also tuned into people who crossed in great turmoil, and that was much harder. There's a lot of fear, and I don't think that we just carry that with us. I think that we get supported in moving past it on the other side. So I think what happens after this is we get to, like everybody else says, we get to assess, we get to see our part in things,
Hmm.
and then we get to maybe recover a little bit and then discover what's next. But that's how I look at this. People do this work and that's their work between live stuff, and it's not mine.
Hmm. Can you just expand a little bit upon that, the crossing period? Because I haven't really ever heard too many spiritual leaders speak about that. Like,
Well, it's just my experience, and I'm not a spiritual leader. I'm a guy who takes dictation, and I'm really clear on that. I don't want the baggage that comes with people projecting that onto me.
Hmm.
They know as much as I do. What I was describing when I work psychically, which is when I work as I'm a radio, that's my job. So when I'm channeling the guides and I'm doing a book, I'm highly received. It's like I crawl into the back seat of the car and let them do their thing. In a situation like this, where you're asking me questions and then you're asking me to reference them, it's a little bit more like we're sharing the front seat of the car and passing the wheel back and forth. It's a little more casual, and it's why the books are never edited. This is what it came, and this is what it is. When I'm working as a psychic, I'm holding the wheel, and I'm a radio and I'm tuning into the station that is you or the people that you ask about. If the guides that I work with want to comment on something or support somebody, they will. But it's a different radio station, if you can put it that way. So when I step into people, when somebody says, I lost my brother recently, and I'm just wondering how he was, I didn't get to see him or whatever. I'm not messaging from the other side, which is what an evidential medium will probably do, a good one. They say the room was blue and there was, a potted plant in the corner and he loved the candy, whatever somebody would bring through in terms of messaging. And that's very valuable, and I know people that do that well. When I step into somebody, I usually feel what it's like to be them. And I do this mostly with the living. And I don't know the people, I've never seen them. I'm told, begin to resemble them. There's video of me doing this where I literally somatize people's disabilities, that I didn't know that they had. There's something, I think it's somewhere up on maybe Hulu, on one of, the old Unexplained series where I was asked to step into a woman's kid and I somatized the cerebral palsy, and the whole thing was a trip because I didn't know what was happening. I was just smacking myself in the head, and I went deaf, and I'm like, what's going on here? She understood it. I didn't at the time because nobody had told me anything, which was what I was asked for. So sometimes when I go to somebody as they're crossing, I'm feeling what it's like. I'm not going to say to leave the body because I'm not necessarily tuned into the body primarily. I'm tuned into the entirety of the person. But there's been this kind of wonder that sets in, and it's just beautiful. It's this feeling of leaving one reality and stepping into another, which is what I really understand that death is. It's another level of vibration that we go to. It's not the end of something, it's a shift more than anything else. That was how I experience it. When I've tuned into people who've left under great duress, suicide sometimes is like that. People are often just out of their mind with fear. You know, it's a hard thing. And so I'm there, but I don't track them when they go past the body. I'm still with them at the end. And I understand that if that happens, somebody's hopefully there to support them in their transition. But that's not my work. I don't have evidence in my own experience to speak to that.
Thank you.
Do we create the things that are bad situations in our life? Like if we get cancer, is that something we attract or create because it's so easy to have almost
Yeah.
a sense of spiritual guilt?
Well, I think there's no need for spiritual guilt. You know, my initial introduction to energy work, and part of what spurred my clairaudience and clairsentience developing, was I studied a form of energy healing when I was in my maybe 31 years old, which is, you know, half my life ago now. And it was at the height of the AIDS epidemic, and I was volunteering at a center for people that were living with life-challenging illness that actually Marianne Williamson had started in Lower Manhattan. I didn't know her there. I was just showing up on Sundays to do the work that I was invited to go do. And when I meet people now who said, why did I create this thing, you know, and, you know, I think we come to learn different things in a life. But the guides say we're in vibrational accord, and they say ACCORD, ACHORD is on a piano with everything that we experience. But I don't think it means that we personally created it. I'm going to give you an example. If I'm living in a town where there is a company poisoning the water to save money, and everybody's getting sick from the bad water, did I create this situation? No. But I am in accord with a collective world where we allow such things to happen. Do you understand that? That's part of the possibilities that I live with in this world. So I know that there are people that would disagree and say, well, you created it and it's your experience. But I also think my guides talk about what they call the common field. And the common field, they say, is reality as we experience it. And they say the common field is an octave. And it's a series of tones, lower to high. They don't say good and bad. They'll say high and low, low being more dense, higher being lighter, more refined. You can think of, you know, evil and love, perhaps, as at different ends of that spectrum. But everything that we're experiencing is happening in this collective. And we are all contributing to this reality that we see. The guides say, if you can see it, if you can think it, you're in vibrational accord to it. And this is the world we are experiencing. So their teaching, and a lot of it, is about lifting to what they call the upper room. It's their term, not mine, which they say is the next octave up. The next octave, they say the reality is structured in tone, in octaves. And the next octave up is not holding the vibration of fear that we're so entrenched in here in the lower field. So like it or not, we're always invoking fear or supporting fear because it's what we expect to be there. And so shifting our vibration beyond that aligns us to what exists beyond it. And then you move into a higher level of accord. And that's how they say a world is made new. So I really have a hard time, you know, with I think that we can have party to illness and we can be out of accord, but I think we're in a world that is out of accord. on a much larger level, and so we have all these things, and there are different things that contribute to them that are practical, and you know, and that's it. I don't know, but I also really do believe that the soul has an agenda for us, and that we're here to learn, and everything can be learned through, which is another way of saying, the difference between, victimhood and mastery. If everything is seen as an opportunity to learn, then we have ways to experience things where we're not being undermined. And I think that probably includes illness.
What insights do you or the guides have about the energetic landscape of the coming year? Are there any themes or shifts they foresee for humanity?
I mean, I'll go there, I think. I always say I'm not a precog. I don't do fortune telling. The guides have been pretty accurate when they foretold the landscape, because if you go back to the books, the first one was channeled in 2009, you can sort of track our trajectory through that, and the books are written, they're written a year before they're out in print. Let me just see. The young lady wants to know what's to come. What's to come? What's to come is what you choose. What's to come is what you choose. You're going to have to live with your own contradictions and the values you've inherited, and the values you've inherited that are seeking to be displaced in somewhat disruptive ways. When you see a challenge, meet it in a higher way. Meet it in a higher way. Don't move into fear. Don't move into fear, and don't claim anger. And don't claim anger if it's self-justifying. If it's self-justifying, this is not the time. This is not the time to worry about being right. Indeed, it is the time. Indeed, it is the time to learn what it means to make peace, to learn what it means to make peace, and to claim peace, and to claim peace, and to honor your brothers and sister, and to honor your brothers and sister. And by honor, we mean protect and save. And by honor, we mean protect and save, protect and save. When you hurt your neighbor, you hurt yourself. You hurt yourself. You deny their right to be. When you deny their right to be, you deny yourself. You deny yourself. Every choice made in fear, including to make someone an enemy, including to make someone the enemy, harms you as much as the other, period. They're saying period, so I guess that's what they're going to say about this.
That's great.
Can you talk about what it means to embody innocence as talked about in that book, and how it contrasts to just being naive?
I think they're two different things. When they talk about innocence, they're talking about the aspect of self, which they call the divine self, or the monad, or the God within, which they say is in innocence. Now I'm not a religious guy at all. I mean, the teachings that come through me have been described by some as Hermetic, some as Gnostic, and others as Christian mysticism. So I don't know, I don't place it myself, and maybe it holds pieces of all of that. I really can't speak to that. But they say that the God within knows no sin. And their definition of sin is really simple. It's about the denial of the divine. God within does not deny itself in anyone or anything. It cannot. You see, they say God sees God in all of its creations. It is not separate from the one beside you, and it is not separate from God in and as all things. So that's the aspect of self that holds the value, and that's my word, the value of innocence. It isn't being naive or stupid. I mean, I always have to say this about discernment. I live on Maui, where there's a lot of beaches, and occasionally there are sharks. And if there's a sign that says shark sighted, don't swim, I'm going to stay out of the damn water. It's not rocket science. It doesn't mean the water is evil, and you should never go into the water. I can do that if I want to, but that's not what the meaning is. So that's about being prudent, not about being naive. The Book of Innocence is a very trippy book. And as it was coming, I was sort of grappling with what they were speaking to, which is a very simple premise, that we have been operating in a belief in separation that is inherently untrue. So the belief that God is, if there is one, it's up there on a cloud somewhere, or, you know, you need an intercessor, you need a priest or a rabbi or a prophetess, you know, somebody to take you there, which they say is untrue, you know. But they say that our memories, individually and collectively, like it or not, all hold a false lens. So the lens on the camera is the lens of separation, which is tainted by fear. And every memory we have is informed by that. So basically, our memory is false. It's not accurate. It's all informed by something that was never true. And we've built a civilization around that premise. So the idea of restoration to our innate knowing, and they say knowing is realization, is the knowing of the self as of the whole, which is again the reclamation of innocence, you know, and so they talk a lot in that book about memory and the reclaiming of memory in the higher octave, you know, that even memory itself, which is just an idea of what was, can be reknown in a higher way.
It's mind-blowing. What guidance do the guides offer for those seeking to live in greater alignment with their soul's purpose?
Oh gosh. You know, I think the challenge with that one is that the way we think about soul's purpose in this, at least in this country, is it must be my career. You know, what's my career? And was I born to be a vacuum cleaner salesman? I don't know. You know, I don't know if that's it. But that's how we think of it. The guides, you know, work with these claims of truth. I know who I am, I know what I am, I know how I serve. They've always said, when they first brought those in, and I was still doing a little group in my apartment in those days. This is when they were dictating, I think, their third book, which is called The Book of Knowing and Worth, which is a lovely book. And we all understood, I know who I am, which is the God within, that's who we really are. And we know, I know what I am, we sort of got that, which was the manifestation of that. I know how I serve. Everybody still thought that's what they did for a living, like how they showed up in the world. And the correction was made, and they say how one serves is how one is most perfectly expressed, or most fully expressed would be a better word, as the divine self, the God within you expressing itself in the world it inhabits and shares with others. And so perhaps there is one thing, you know, I'm doing what I do now. I was a college teacher for 25 years, and I was pretty good at it, and I really enjoyed it, and that was how I served at that time. And, you know, before that, I was, you know, a bratty, creative, drunken kid, you know. So was the question, how does one find out or know what one's real purpose is? Well, really, it's listen to your heart, acknowledge what comes, and acknowledge what comes, your secret wish. Your secret wish is most likely your purpose, is most likely your purpose, beyond what you were told it should be, beyond what you were told it should be. It may have very little to do with how one makes a living, with how one makes a living, and everything to do with how one lives their life, with how one lives their life, period. And they're saying period. They're saying, say this, you know, they've often said that the most enlightened person in the community might be the school crossing guard, that lady who's been there for 50 years with a little sign, you know, doing her thing, you know. And, you know, I don't think, now there's this thing called the spiritual market that people are trying to get careers in. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time before that was even something people considered. I did it in my living room for 18 years with a little basket. People would put 10 bucks in it and leave, and that was fine. You know, I was doing my college work. I don't know. And I think, I really do think that, and I often say this to people when I read for them, what would you do if you could do anything? What would you do if you weren't worried about what your neighbors would say, or the benefits, or the salary? What would you do if you could do anything? Somebody's getting paid to do it somewhere, truthfully, you know, and it's a way to live your life. But that's the real way to live your life. Nobody told me I could do this. I thought this was nuts. You had to drag me away from my college jobs because I was, you know, in my 50s, I was walking away from retirement. you know, match, what, you know, matching, they match your retirement with it, insurance. You know, my friends were thinking about retiring and I was just walking away. It was the best thing I ever did. But what I did before that was just as valuable. And so maybe that's what I was there to do, because it did support me in the work that I do now in every way.
You almost feel like you live like two entirely different lives.
No, because I mean, I do. I think there was the life up until 25. And then there's what came after that, which was deeply challenging. My early life was deeply, it was not an easy one. I had a screwy family like most of us did, and, you know, a lot of unhappiness. But I was doing this work when I began to have an experience of source, God, whatever you want to call it, began to believe that maybe there was something in there and had some evidential experience of it, which really rocked me in a big way, because I think I needed something like that, because I was, you know, basically still a skeptic about a lot of things. I'm not a good New Ager. I've never been that. But once that started, it did change the trajectory of my life. And I think it does for most people. You know, I've often said going from a world in which there's no such thing as God or a higher power, whatever you want to call it, to one in which there is, it's like moving to another planet. It's a whole other thing. Nothing was what I thought it was then. If that was true, nothing was what I thought it was. And so that was the beginning of that other life. And I was doing, while I was teaching college, you know, I was deeply invested in developing, you know, and developing a relationship with whatever that thing was, and was fascinated by energy work and healing, because again, it was tangible, I could feel it. And I like things that I could feel and see, in my case here, because I'm primarily clairaudient.
Follow up real quick, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're somebody, I'm not just saying this, it's true. Like every time we see you, you get like better looking. And I don't know if that's because of, is that because of like the energy that is existing, like the guide's energy? Is that actually powerfully healing you? Like, or is it just your own work? I'm
I had a
curious.
haircut last night. That might,
Oh,
that
that's what it is. That's
really
I
what it
love
is.
Paul's answers. They're just the best.
No, it's true. I mean, you know, I looked like Grizzly Adams. You're too young to remember Grizzly Adams, but I looked like him yesterday afternoon. Um, you know, I take, I'm living a different life, yes, and I take better care of myself, yes, and I lost a mountain of weight. You know, and I'm still challenged by most things, but you know, I'm still single, so you know, maybe one day somebody else will see what you're seeing, and I will have a nice other experience of being. But right now, I live in the jungle in a rainforest in Maui, and I'm still learning to drive. So
Oh,
I
you
can't
didn't get
even.
the license yet?
No, I just took lessons again. I got a new car, and it's a really tiny one. The one that I got was like a boat. It was like a steamship. It was terrifying because it was like, you know, now I got a little tiny one. It parks. It just goes into little places. I'm much happier. So I'm learning much more quickly, and I think I'll pass next time.
Nice.
Thank you
I
for
think
asking.
that will come with a new partner if that's what you
Yeah, you
seek,
got to drive around to find somebody.
right?
Pretty much.
Oh, um, I don't you ever feel like you want to say to the guys, like, can you, I guess what I want to say is, do you ever feel inclined to get things you want through them? Like love, like anything.
They're teachers, first and foremost. I don't necessarily know that my personal wishes are at the top of their list.
Mm.
And that's not to say that they don't care. I think I'm extraordinarily well cared for. Everything around this work, including the people that I work with, has been provided and beautifully. I really have not had to struggle. I mean, the first book was dictated when it was finished. They had said it'll take 2 weeks. It took two weeks and 2 days because I took 2 days off to go teach. They said at the very end, it's going to be published. It's the first publisher who reads it. Don't haggle. It was never even submitted. The first person who read it said, had it on the published 8 months later, it was like on the shelves, you know, and I didn't haggle. And considering how little I was paid, it's a good thing because, you know, it was perfect, you know, so I trust that. Once in a while, I'll get in there and I'll say, oh, I really want to have this experience, or I really want to get to know this person. And God forbid it happens, because usually it's like, be careful what you ask for. So the guides I work with are funny. It's not that we can't ask, because, you know, we can claim our birthright, and which is to receive what's there for us. But they also say you move to a level of coherence or vibrational accord where you move into reception with your good. And when people are newer into metaphysics, I think, there's a tendency to look at God as a catalog of things that can be ordered from. And then people get really disappointed when they have the difficult diagnosis, or something happens, the marriage ends, or, you know, I didn't ask for these things. And, you know, they're all opportunities to learn. But my understanding is a little bit different, which is you move into basically they say source knows what you need before you ask. So when you're moving into receptivity, you're moving into allowance and agreement and vibrational accord with what's for one's highest good. That doesn't mean we don't get to say, if I don't say, it can be so. You know, the guides say nothing can be claimed until it's first realized as a possibility. If I say it's impossible for me to have a partner, that's going to be my evidence more than likely. You understand? I have to do my part, and then move into the awareness that it exists and then can be had, and that I deserve it. All of those things I do think are a party to this. But no, I don't ask them that much about my own stuff.
Yeah. Can I ask the real question?
Of course.
Okay. So I think this is a good one. How can we acknowledge and address and amend the past without continually creating the same thing from the past? Keep creating the past.
The guides have said that the personality self, they call it the small self, not to make it bad, it's just the personality structure, knows itself entirely through historical data. It's all it knows, is what it's been taught. The divine self, or the true self, or the God within, is not bound by that. And the teaching of the upper room, as they bring it through, is that, behold, I make all things new. It's the realization of what exists beyond the old, and that we're not having to make choices. A simple thing is not to make choices based in fear. They say the action of fear is to claim more fear, and every choice we've ever made in fear has gotten us more of the same. And that's a simple one, but it's an enormous teaching. It's what the guides have been talking about in the last several books, is this whole idea of not replicating the past because we think that that's, you know, all we can have and all we've known. The guides have said many times, you know, we have been at war for so long that we can't imagine being without it. Consequently, we're always at war. And they say, you know, until we move to a level of consciousness, which is again vibrational accord, where war is not a possibility, we're going to have it. And if we want to learn the futility of war by fighting until there's nobody left standing, we can do that. But they say they don't believe that that's going to happen. You know, we've chosen at a higher level to move beyond that schism, you know, this idea of victor and, you know, victor and victim, this whole idea of conqueror and all that stuff that we've had for so long. They say it can happen, but it's a huge change in consciousness. They say it's happening now, truthfully, and that it'll take a few generations. We may have to hit bottom in order to realize that we don't have to do this anymore. It seems that way some days to me, truthfully. So I don't know that I answered the question or not, but that's what I said. So I'll live with it.
You too.
With the new book, or just in general, what is the latest attunement that the guides recommend using?
Where they're getting to, and this is mostly in the book that's not out yet. You know, one of the attunements, the final attunement of the series in the first 12 books, was the claim God is, God is, God is, which is the realization of God as all things, you know. And then they actually took us beyond that because they say our idea of God is tainted still by what God has meant historically and culturally. A loving God, a punishing God, an old man on a cloud, you know, a goddess that's a slayer, you know, all of these things. And that all of those are facets or faces of the one God. But now they've started moving simply to it is. It simply is. God is, it is, it is. And I've actually had an experience with that one, which is kind of wonderful because God is still feels heavy to me, but it is, and it is all source, is something that can be experienced. So let me ask if there's because, you know, for people that are just being introduced to this work, is there an attunement that would be helpful for me at this time? Know thyself. Know thyself. I know who I am. I know who I am. I realize who I am. I realize who I am. I know, which means realize the divine self is who I am. The divine self is who I am, or the essence of my being, beyond any idea I've held, beyond any idea I have held, born in the personality structure. That is the high one to work with now. That is the high one to work with now, period. And they're saying period.
I think that I would like to ask, we have so many questions. Okay. Has there ever been any reference to, or do you have a thought about what the guides would say about AI?
Well, the only time they've ever mentioned it was in an interview with this guy Duncan Trussell, and I think that's somewhere up online. It was the first interview I did with him at the Bell House, and he asked about it. And this is a number of years ago, before it was present. And he said, "Are we going to be, you know, taken over by AI?" And then what the guide said is, AI cannot love, so no, AI will not be capable of love, and that's what's going to set you apart. So, you know. That's the only time I've heard anything. I don't remember the exact quote, but that was pretty close to it. Anything about AI, it's your creation. They're saying it's your creation. Don't forget that it's your creation, and it's created in one way. Anything that's been created in one way can be reclaimed in a higher, can be reclaimed in a higher, altered to move to the higher octave, to the higher octave. We're not saying it's a bad thing. We are not saying it's a bad thing, but you must know its true purpose. But you must know its true purpose, which is to support, not to control, and not to overtake, and not to overtake. If it's seen and support in a higher way, if it is seen and support in a higher way, wonderful things can happen as a result. Wonderful things can happen as a result. If it becomes a detriment, you must recreate it in a higher way. You must recreate it in a higher way, period. And they're saying period.
Beautiful. I have more of like a personal question, professional question, but you, every time I talk to Noah, every time we're interviewing you,
Yeah.
Noah's your admin. He's great for anyone listening. Paul's got a great team. He's always, it seems like every time before we're interviewing you, you're off to a retreat in Costa Rica. And he said it's sold out again, so congratulations. I was just curious about those retreats, what happens on them, and yeah, you ready? Are you excited?
Should come and check one out. They're fun.
We want
Love
to,
that.
but they're always sold out so quickly.
I've got one in Maui coming up in April, which is, there's room in that one. The guides are teaching, they're lecturing every day, they're bringing through the attunements. People are working with each other, people are learning how to work with the energy and employ it. People often have big openings, and there's ample time for people to ask personal questions or questions the guides about their teaching. So, but it's a full thing. I mean, I didn't. Nobody told me. I didn't know anything about this when I started doing it. So, I'm channeling sometimes, 3, 4 hours, in a day at these things. I mean, the sessions are, 2.5, and then in the morning, usually, and 2 in the afternoon. Nobody told me that people only channel for like half an hour at a time. I didn't do that. So I developed this muscle, this ability for endurance, channeling. But it's not just me. So, I mean, I come through as me for the psychic stuff, but the guides come prepared, and every event, whether it's an evening or a weekend or a 5-day or a week-long thing, seems to have a trajectory. But there's a lot of phenomena that occurs, which I enjoy because I like being in the energy. That's why I did that group in my apartment for all those years. I like to feel the energy. I wasn't so interested in what the guides were saying, but I like to be in the motion of the vibration.
Very cool. Actually, one more follow-up on that. You also have these workshops that you do, and I know hundreds of our members go to those and they love them. Could you just speak a little bit? Because I actually haven't been to one yet, and I should. I can't believe I haven't been to one yet. But could you tell me about those and what happens?
Pretty much every Wednesday, almost every Wednesday, I'm doing a class. I do the Wednesday night live streams, and then once a month I do a 5-day intensive. And the intensive are a couple of hours long. The guides will usually lecture once or twice during that time on a focused topic. Although they're going to do they'll give me the title, but they're going to do what they're going to do. They have a way of managing it. I just show up. And then there's a lot of time for questions. So people have the opportunity to ask personal questions about their lives or the people in their lives or the teachings. And that's what happens. They are intense. And the energy, I'm told, is as palpable online as it is in a live event. What you don't get to do online, unless you've got somebody in the room, you guys could do it together, because the guides will occasionally work with the attunements. And it's nice to do that when you're with somebody else and you can feel the energy as they're, expanding, and as you're ascending into them. But yeah, check it out.
Cool.
I would just love to hear in closing what this last year that's passed, what's been just the biggest change or thing that you've learned, and has it been from the guides or just from life without a voice teaching you?
I mean, I lost my mother last October, so just over a year ago. And that's been interesting, and not unexpected. So I think it's been more life. I think the consistency of the work with the guides at this point provides balance for me, although I have to shift and integrate each time they do a book because they're working through me, and it's a little bit like getting your world rocked each time. Usually right before they do a book, I'm really going through it so that they can bring through what they have planned. And a lot of it was really about trying to write again, do my own writing for the first time in years. I don't write these books. My names are on the cover, but I didn't write them. And so I had the worst writer's block of anybody I've ever met in my life when I was a young man. It was terribly painful for me. And so I'm having to sit through some of that and some of those fears once again, and hopefully I'll get through them because I'd like to do this. I hope I don't run away from it. I suppose it's a possibility, but right now I've got a publisher and I've got the need to complete it. So that's been a big part of the year too.
Beautiful. My last question would be, do you or the guides have any advice for anybody who might have a block in their life right now, like Paul?
Oh, that's a good question. Ask for help, trust it will come, trust that it will come, and then take actions. And then take actions contrary to the block, contrary to the block, period.
Beautiful.
Oh, I love that.
All right, well, it was awesome seeing you again, Paul. Thank you for updating us. And
Thank you. This is my favorite of all our interviews. It
You
was
said
really
that
good.
every time
I
after.
know. Oh,
Yeah.
it's not untrue.
And thank you everyone for
Very
being here with
sweet.
us. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All
We
right.
love
Love
you,
you all.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.